Hello everybody, it's Murray here. So we've been learning how to paint realistic water with light and sparkles. We've also been learning how to do shallow water and waves. And today we're going to paint a really realistic painting of a wave. We're going to paint it step by step in real time. It's going to take just over 50 minutes and we're going to paint this fantastic painting. So let's get into it. So the colours you're going to need are titanium white, cad yellow, cad red, phthalo green, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, burnt umber brown and light grey. Now I've got a 10 by 12 inch canvas and all I'm going to do is I'm going to get some ultramarine blue and I'm just going to draw a rough shape of a wave. So I drew it with pencil, but I like to always go over my outline. And I always tend to do it in a dark colour like blue. So all I'm trying to do is just create a rough shape of a triangular kind of wave that's going to come down. I used blue acrylic paint, and then what I tend to do is dry it with a hairdryer once I've finished, and then I can just paint over it. But the good thing about using dark blue in the ultramarine blue is it's really good to see, and the great thing about acrylics, you can kind of see where it goes. So all I've done, look, I've drawn the wave, and all I've done is dried it with a hairdryer so I don't smudge it when I'm painting over the top. So if you dry your painting before you paint over it, it just means you won't spread blue everywhere where you're trying to mix things. So we've got some cool colours on the right, like phthalo green, which is a really nice sea colour. It's kind of like a turquoisey bluey sort of colour. And we can make it cooler with blues and purples, or we can make it warmer with yellows and reds. So I tend to put the cool colours on the right hand side and I tend to put the warm colours on the left. So to cool it down, we're going to add some blue and we're going to make it more pastel by adding white. And you see it makes a lovely bright turquoise colour. Look at that. So this green's fantastic for painting seas. Phthalo green. If I was you, I would recommend buying some because you can make really nice different shades of turquoise and different shades of seawater. So I've just added some more to make it darker. You can add purple and browns when you add to colour make things more grey. So look, I can cool it down and make it more grey, adding purple. And it just makes it look more realistic. And the same with blue. Look, I can add blue back into the colour and turn it darker and cooler. So look, by adding blue, you go one way. And if I want to make it more green, I could add yellow. If I want to make it more purpley or warmer, I can add red. So you can just use and combine different colours. So all I'm going to do, I've got this kind of dark bluey turquoise here. And all I want to do is kind of make a mid-tone that's not too bright and not too dark. And I'm going to sort of block around my wave. Now I'm going to have the light come in from the right hand side, and I want to teach you how to make your work look three-dimensional. Really easy, so don't be discouraged. It's really easy. But we're just going to use colours to kind of do that. Now if a wave kind of comes up, the rest of the water is kind of flat. So what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to leave the shape of the big wave. Think of like a barrel or like a sausage or something like that. And I'm just going to, kind of looks like a dumpling. Like a prawn dumpling or something like that. So I'm going to just block in my corners with this colour. And if the light is kind of coming from the right, I'm going to make it a little bit more pastel. So I'm just going to make a bluer shade. So I've still got a dirty brush. I've just added lots of white and blue. And if you think the sky is kind of white and blue, I'm just going to add a little bit of purple just to cool it down a bit. All I'm doing is I'm kind of making a colour which is the sea mixed with the sky colour. So look, it's a shade lighter. And as we move towards the right hand corner, I'm just blending it into the previous colour. Now I just tend to use big chunky brushes. I don't really use expensive brushes because I paint every day. So I cane brushes. I go through so many because I'm always working and teaching. So I literally go through hundreds. You can buy expensive brushes, but I just buy these big chunky ones. I've just added a tiny bit more white as we move up into the canvas. But the reason I use chunky brushes is it's so much easier using a big chunky brush to cover more distance. And I also like, if you've noticed in the videos, look, I paint right up to my edges and I tend to go round my edges. Because the nice thing is not everyone can afford frames and things for painting. So if you always paint your edges while you're doing the tutorials like there, they will match. And especially if you can use things like box canvases and things like that, you can always get a really, really nice sort of outline around your painting. So I was just pointing there on camera. All I'm doing, I just added a little bit more white. And all I'm doing, look, I'm just blending it. And the reason I'm adding white is just to make it look like the water is kind of fading off into the distance. And by adding white at the top of my painting, it just looks more like it's blending in with the sky. That's all I'm doing. So look, take your time. Just chill out and blend. To blend, all I do, look, I go back and forth. I'm using this big chunky brush. I'm not putting much pressure. And I'm just rocking it back and forth, look, back and forth. And as the paint kind of runs off my brush and I run out of paint, I just gently, look, just go back and forth, look, back and forth. And I just blend areas together. And don't worry, look, if you do get some scuffs and you do get some sort of like different shades in the water, don't worry, because water's always moving. So it actually looks kind of cool if you get like different shades, okay? So we've got all that blocked in. So let's get some phthalo green. I was going to say blue, but it's phthalo green. And some purple. So we're just going to cool it down with the purple. Let's add a bit more. Sometimes colour mixing takes a bit longer than you think. So it's always best to just sort of try things. I've just loaded up some more phthalo green because I'd run out. It's always best to just take your time. Look. So if I add more yellow, I can turn it more green. So I always insist, try to nail the colours. Now I'm just going to speed the video up a shade, because all I'm doing is blocking in our dumpling sort of shape, our sort of weird shape. So like I'm using this sort of dark phthalo green and purple mix. Now you can see it's very scruffy. Can you see like there's lots of brush marks? It's really scruffy because it's a big surface that I've got to cover with my big brush. That's totally normal. Look, don't worry, don't panic. When you paint with acrylics, sometimes you need to go over it twice. And you can look, you can get thicker paint, and when it's a bit dry, look, you can just go over the top. And it looks so much more professional. It takes all those scuffs out. But until it's dry, it will just sort of take the paint back off it. So always, look, just do a section. Try your best. Look, if you get scuff marks, and no matter what you do, it won't take the paint. Just don't fret. Just dry your work with a hairdryer and just go over the top. So sometimes, obviously, people don't tell you this necessarily in the tutorials. In between me editing it, all I'm doing is I'm pausing my camera. I've got a hairdryer next to me. I'm just spending 5 seconds just blitzing it with a hairdryer, and then I just go over it again. So just because you don't see it doesn't mean I'm not doing it. Okay? It's like most things. Most people don't know the hidden things that goes towards doing something. So look, mine's really streaky. Don't worry. Look, there's even some scuff marks here and there. Don't worry. We can always fix this stuff. Like, none of it's anything major. So just take your time. What you can do, look, you can spend 2 minutes just mixing up colours. Look, and where your things like your blending looks a bit rubbish, you can go over the top. I like to, before I move on in a painting, I like to just spend 5 minutes just going over areas that I notice that look a bit rubbish. As I say, in a tutorial, you probably won't get that told to you. Pause the video, step back from your painting, and just like look at areas. So all I'm doing now, I'm mixing white, blue, ultramarine blue, white and purple. And I'm getting a nice cool pastel blue. I'm going to add a tiny bit of the phthalo green. And I've got really pale, light sort of pastel blue. Yeah, so it's just these colours combined with predominantly white. Okay. And you can add more phthalo green to turn it more turquoise, like I'm doing, if you don't want a jump in colour. And all I'm going to do, look, at the top, I'm just going to make it a shade lighter. And this is what I was saying to you about sometimes with acrylics going over it twice. So look, I'm painting my edges because I've changed the colour. And all I'm doing, I'm just going to go over the top and just make it lighter. Because I want to make it look that the light is coming from that area. So I'm just going to add a little bit more blue and mix it into the previous colour. While all this paint is wet, I may as well use it. Oh no, I put too much blue. Oh dear. But look, this is what I keep trying to explain to people. Look, the great thing about acrylics, look, I can just add more of the previous colour, some phthalo green, and just mix it while it's still wet. And even if it wasn't wet, it's not the end of the world. I can dry it with a hairdryer and go over it. So acrylics are really forgiving. They're perfect for beginners. So don't ever panic. I cock up all the time. I'm forever making mistakes. If I actually showed you without editing, you would see me screaming and doing things a lot because I'm always making mistakes. And I like to leave them in the videos because I'm trying to show you everyone does. It's totally normal. It's like having scuffs and scrapes on your canvas. That's totally normal. But doing this, look, just going over the top, enjoying painting, relaxing, spending time reworking areas. That's why it looks so good. There's no magic pill or no magic click that everyone loves at the moment. It's just taking your time and enjoying it. So let's get some phthalo green and some cad yellow. And let's make a little bit more dark version with a hint of yellow. And on this side, excuse the focus, because the light is coming from this side, I'm going to make it more green and more yellow. And as we come down, so look, can you see now it's got a second coat of paint, how much more solid that colour looks. Looks much more professional, doesn't it? And it's simply because it's got a second coat of paint. So again, there's no trick. It's nothing hard. It just looks much better now. And then as we go down, I'm going to add more purple and more ultramarine blue. And I'm going to do the opposite. So think of yin and yang. One side's in the shade. So look, it's really cool and dark in tone. And the other side is in the light. So it's got the warm yellow. And it's really lighter in tone. So think of hot and cold, up and down. It's just opposites. And I'm just going to blend it. So our wave, basically this underpainting, the reason it takes a bit long is because it's the blending that tricks the eye. So we've got light colour here, and then we've got darker colours, and we're going to swap to a flat brush, and we're going to paint waves. So flat brushes are absolutely essential because they make your life so much easier, and they literally don't cost nothing. They're so cheap. But what it does, I'm just mixing ultramarine blue and purple and white to get a nice cool colour. What they do is they make your life so much easier. Let's just add some phthalo green to paint straight lines. And we're going to add light grey. Now to get light grey, you can mix and some ultramarine blue, brown. What am I doing? Burnt umber brown. Sorry, I'm trying to have two conversations in my brain at the same time. So by adding light grey and burnt umber brown, you can make it more grey. To make light grey, it's black, white and orange, if you would believe. So black, white and orange, and you will get light grey. You don't necessarily have to buy it. So going back to what I was originally trying to say, is if you use a flat brush, look, it's so much easier to do lines because the brush is flat. It's like holding a ruler with paint on it. So you can just drag it across. I like to make my lines a little bit bobbly, just so they look more like a wave. But all I'm doing, I'm using this sort of middle colour of it's not too dark, it's not too light. And this sort of is going to bridge the area between our really light water in the background and our really dark wave. So think of the Three Little Bears where she has the hot porridge. She has really one extreme, and then she has another extreme, and she sort of meets in the middle. And then think of things like politics. I shouldn't say this on my channel. But you have two extremes, and the answer is normally in the middle. But most people scream at each other. So what I'm trying to say is, this colour kind of bridges the two areas together. So look, just create these lines, these scoops, and I'm doing them quite chunky. And these are going to be the big sort of shadows of caps of waves. And all I'm doing is I go to the top of the painting. I'm trying to make them a little bit closer together and a little bit more flat. And then they kind of look like they're fading out. Look, like they're fading off because they're a little bit closer. And what you can do is you can just go back with hardly any paint and just put in some subtle ones in between. So try to just put some hints of ones in between, not too many, and it just looks nice. Now this is a trick, look, with the same sharp edge of the brush, look, we can start building up our wave. So all I'm doing, I'm trying to imagine like a barrel sort of coming over. I'm using the sharp edge of the brush to kind of create scoops. And I'm just using this mid-tone to sort of, look, go scrape. So it's kind of like when we paint the sort of stalk of a tree or something. I can even sort of curve it round. I can sort of shape my wave because my wave looks a bit weird. The reference photo that I took, the wave was kind of weird. It was kind of bobbly. So I'm just kind of shaping it. And look, I can sort of curve it round with my brush. So this brush is so handy to use, honestly. And they're literally £1 or $1. So again, you don't have to have a specific make. Anything expensive. It's just called a flat brush. Flat-headed, excuse me. And can you see now that using this mid-tone, so the answer, like I was saying, is in the middle, is kind of bringing the two areas together. Look at that. Starting to look really 3D. But just like all my other tutorials, can you see the importance of taking your time and doing the underpainting and all the blending first? Because now we're putting the detail over the top. It's tricking your eye. Because look, I've got all these gaps and it's starting to look 3D. So if you rush the first stage, it's hard to go back and reblend things once you've put the detail on. So it's always best, even if you find the videos, like I know everyone wants to do everything quick and wants everything instantly in today's age. But if you just take your time at the beginning, I'm telling you now, it makes it so much easier. So I'm just putting some sort of curves to bring it down. Now over here, it's got less kind of detail, and also it's closer to me, so the sort of gaps are going to be a bit larger. You know, like when we've been painting waves, where we've had the larger waves in the previous videos being bigger at the bottom of the canvas. Well, we're kind of doing the same thing. And this wave, it was quite strange. It came up, but then it had sort of all the sort of foamy bits at the top. It was kind of like barreling down. We get all the sort of wash. So I'm using this cool blue to kind of insinuate that. So we're going to put things like white and highlights over the top. But I like to use cool blues because these are the areas that aren't getting as much light. And it kind of looks like the white bits in the shade. So I'm kind of doing that. So look at this, it's starting to work. It's starting to look all 3D. And we're 19 minutes or so into the tutorial. So it's really quick, it's really easy, and this is real time. So you don't have to spend hours and hours becoming a wonderful painting. And like the great thing about YouTube, you can change the language, you can change the speed if you press the little cog button at the bottom. I figured out this the other day. My wife is Spanish, and I thought it'd be funny to put myself in Spanish so she can see me saying hola, hello. So she really likes it. So there we go. So we've got this really, really cool 3D painting starting to take effect. We've got the sort of detail now, so we kind of know where everything's going to be. So let's get some of our phthalo green, and let's get some yellow, and let's make a lighter, brighter shade. So look at that. Turn it sort of like a lime green. That would be fantastic for sort of palm trees and things like that. That sort of colour for leaves. So phthalo green and yellow. And we're just going to add a little bit blue, look, to cool it back down, to make it darker. We'll go a little bit white to make it more pastel. And all I'm going to do, because there's kind of a jump between the wave colour and the background colour, I'm going to kind of make an in-between colour again. So I'm just going to add a little bit blue. So I'm going to try and make like a lighter shade that's got more green in it. It's a bit more turquoisey. There we go. So as I say, sometimes mixing the colours, it can be a bit of a struggle. Like I've noticed as I've got better in painting, I take a lot longer mixing colours. If you watch some of the really, really good artists here on YouTube, even though their videos might be quick, they spend a lot of time at the beginning mixing colours on their palette. So look, can you see now I've got this more yellowy green, and all I'm doing is I'm colouring in the gaps that were in the shade. So look, I'm going to colour in, look, this gap. I'm just colouring it in. But because it's a lighter colour and tone, it should look like it's kind of getting bleached in the sunlight. So it looks like these areas are in the light. And the great thing is, look, I can just colour it in. I don't even have to know where to do it. I can literally just colour in the dark areas, look. And again, I'm just linking areas, look, I'm just bringing it down just to link areas. Look how cool that is. And then look, I can add a bit of the darker tone to kind of create a mid-tone. So think of what I was just saying to you. We go from one extreme to another, and the answer's kind of in the middle. So think of like you hear someone else's point of view and you kind of debate. So think of this. We're sort of adding sort of these colours, and we're creating a middle ground. Here we go. You can tell I listen to a lot of philosophy, don't you? So there we go, look. So we're bridging these two extremes. We've got this nice middle colour. And then all we're going to do, look, we're just going to put a shade of that here. I still want this bottom left-hand corner to be incredibly dark, because I want to sign it in that corner. So I want a nice colour, dark colour in the corner. I'm just going to make some of the ripples a little bit of this colour, just so it looks all matching. So why not create some little ripples, just again to make it more 3D. A lot of this we're going to cover up with froth and things, but that is starting to look wicked. That's starting to look really, really cool. So we've got this like lighter colour here, and all I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back to it. I'm just going to create some scoops. I swear my focus loves my khaki green t-shirt. Every time I go near it, it seems to go out of focus, so it skews the focus. But all I'm doing, look, once I come away, there we go. It's just creating sort of ripples with that lighter shade. And then look, I'm just using the medium shade and the lighter shade kind of mixed here in the middle. And then I'm just using the medium colour. Look, so we've got the light shade, the medium colour. And I'm just mixing it. Some of these areas might be getting a little bit of shadow, so I'm just going to make it a little bit darker, because that wave would be kind of blocking them. But I think mainly, look, try to not have loads of jumps in colour, because I think a lot of realism, as I say, as you get better in life at drawing and planning your painting, you still can do these really quick, like this painting literally took me an hour. You can do these really realistic paintings in really quick times, not because they're incredibly photorealistic, it's the colours that make it look really realistic. So look, just by spending areas where you've got like a jump, look, I'm kind of just sort of bridging the gaps where I'm noticing there's a big jump between one extreme to another, like here. So I'm just trying to link areas. Look, I'm still leaving some of that shade, but I'm just smoothing it out. And as my paint runs out, look, we'd have a little bit of a highlight here. It just looks more natural. It doesn't look like a jump too much from the really brights to the really darks. And you got to remember, I'm terrible at editing, lighting, sound, all this stuff. It's all new to me doing YouTube. So the painting always looks 10 times better in real life than it looks on the camera. I'm telling you. So like, if it looks good here on YouTube, which is a blessing and I hope it does, I'm telling you now, in real life it looks 10 times better. Because the light and things, I have no idea what I'm doing. I am winging it. So here we go. So let's go back to the lighter shade. And look, it always dries darker acrylics. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get some white. It looked really light, didn't it, when we did it a minute ago? But I'm just going to add some white to it. And I'm just going to put some lighter highlights just here. And I'm going to colour in some of these waves and just turn them a little bit more green. Just hints on some of them. Again, excuse the focus. Because I don't want a huge jump between green and blue. If you look at a sea, just like a sky, the wonderful thing about nature is you don't notice any transitions. It's absolutely perfect. So we kind of want to do that as artists. So look, by putting some white in. See what I'm talking about lighting and focus and things like that? It's very hard with technology. So I'm just putting some highlights. But I think it kind of adds to the realism as well of like being an artist. Trying to be yourself in a world that constantly tries to mold you is a hard thing to do. And you've got to be very, very strong-willed and very, very confident in your own true nature and ability when everyone's trying to tell you what to think and what to do. So I like painting water and I like teaching, and I'm not very good at the videos and stuff, but they're getting better. Even my thumbnails and everything's getting better and things like that. So it's all practice. So I'm just linking these areas together with highlights. And I think if you're authentic and you try your best and you enjoy yourself, you'll do good work. And that's all that really matters, isn't it? Enjoying what you do. So I'm just linking these areas, as I say. Looks a bit weird with a bit of green, but later on, look, we're going to go over the top. So I'm just getting the mid-tone now. I'm just going to make some of these divots a little bit more green. When I get out of the way, you will see. So I'm just turning them a little bit green. Not all of them, just hints of green. Let's have a few over here, just so this area is not left out. And you can make them around your blue. You don't have to cover all your blue. So I'm doing like a mixture, because you get like different color ripples and reflections in water. Because obviously you have things like waves that cast shadows. You might have like rocks or things nearby. And I'm just getting the very dark shade. And I'm just putting in some really harsh ones as we come towards the bottom. So again, think of like this bottom corner. It's not got as much sunlight because the light's coming from the right hand side. So this area is going to be a little bit darker. So I'm just trying to make these areas a bit darker. So let's make some really harsh ripples over here. Just so it looks more 3D. Now, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The channel is doing absolutely fantastic. It's growing at a really quick rate now. And I just want to say, while we're on the subject, thank you to everyone who likes, shares, and comments on all the videos. Please keep that up. Likes and comments really helps the algorithms. So thank you so much. Every time you're doing that, what you're doing is you're helping another artist find the videos. Because we're still quite small compared to everyone else. It's hard to find me sometimes, and lots of people go, wow, we really like your videos, but we couldn't find you. So just by liking and helping out, you're doing a service to your fellow artists. So thank you so much. So I'm just getting some purple, white, and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. I'm making a really sort of bright sort of sky blue. This is going to be my pastel blue. And all I'm going to do is right in the right hand corner, I'm just going to lighten it up just so it looks like the sunlight is shining down. So you've all been learning how to do light and ripples in all the tutorials lately. Well, this is kind of the same thing. Do you remember when we've been doing the waves in the previous tutorials? If anyone is interested, there is loads of playlists on how to paint water and waves on my channel, and loads of step-by-step tutorials. So if you haven't, and you just found this video randomly, and you haven't subscribed or anything like that, there's loads of videos on painting water. And all we're doing, look, we're just making it look, we're going round the waves. I've got barely any paint on my brush. I'm just sort of kind of colouring in areas with this lighter shade, and I'm just smudging it with my finger just to make it look more soft. And all it does is it creates the illusion of sunlight and the skylight sort of kind of shining down and creating ripples in our water. Look at that. And again, it just keeps everything more 3D. We've got all the light coming. And all I'm going to do, again, I'm just going to make a cooler tone. I've added more ultramarine blue. And I'm creating a middle tone. So I'm linking the bright right-hand side with the cold left-hand side. And I'm just linking the two areas together. So there's not so much of a jump. So again, it's the same tricks, but just in different areas. And it should, again, just make the water look more 3D. Now I'm going to do as well lots of tutorials with oils, because I'm producing so much and obviously learning how to do this better. I'm just having the time to do it, but I really want to do some oil tutorials on water, because oil painting is a lot harder, but like anything in life, the harder things tend to yield better results. So it is incredibly hard sometimes, but your work looks super realistic, and also the texture of oils is much more like water. It's more shiny. So look at that. So we're going to get some dark colours. We're going to get some ultramarine blue, some deoxide purple, and some phthalo green. And we're going to make a very dark version. Add a little bit more white, so it's not incredibly dark. It's not like black or anything, but it's still quite dark. So we're just going to add a little bit more green. It's still very blue because it's cool. Can you see that? It's like a cool dark thing. And all we're going to do is, look, we're going to put some harsh ripples. And we're just going to join the wave to the sea. So we're just linking these two areas together. Yeah, there is a playlist on a few oil paintings that we have done. So if anyone is interested in oil painting tutorials, there is a playlist on the channel with lots of seascapes and waves and water. But I want to do more of these sort of water paintings. So I'm just trying to explain. I'm kind of building little triangles, kind of little triangle shapes, just to make my waves look more 3D with these harsh shadows. But yeah, oil painting, especially for water, you don't get as many jumps in the transitions because oils are fantastic for blending. They're so easy. But you can't paint all of it in one go. You have to sort of do the background, leave it to dry for 3 days, then do the highlights, etc. Whereas acrylics, you can literally film it and paint it in 1 hour. So they're less forgiving, they're harder, but they look much more realistic. So we will do some eventually. But if there's any ideas of anything people want to learn, please put ideas in the comments in just under the video. And as I say, there is tons of playlists now to binge. So if you want to watch a specific thing like waves or landscapes, mountains, whatever, forests we've got, you can just sit there and binge away. So I'm just going to make this corner really dark, but it's starting to look really, really cool. And the nice thing is with a painting tutorial, you can always bail at different stages. So this kind of looks kind of cool, like how it is now. I would quite be happy with this painting, but I want to keep going because I want to show you more and more things you can do. But if you kind of wanted like a wave, you could stop now. And then you could always do a second painting, because I kind of think that looks really 3D and really, really cool. And for like literally a painting that's taken just over half an hour, that is pretty damn cool. But as I say, I want to keep teaching you. So we've got this fantastic painting all blocked in now and all knowing where we want to do. But I want to keep adding detail and bits to you to teach you. So we're going to add more white and blue. So more white and ultramarine blue to get our sky color again. And then what we're going to do, we're going to start putting some really sharp highlights. So these are the areas that get absolutely bleached in the skylight or the sunlight. And we're going to start putting some foam on our wave. So this wave, even though some waves come up and they look without foam, but this wave had a bit of foam. And as I say, I kind of want to teach you it. So all I'm doing, I'm creating... It looks white on camera, but it's not. It's really pastel blue and white. So what I'm doing first, I'm putting this sort of really bright sort of pastel blue first. So then when I do put my bright, just pure white over the top, there's areas, again, the transitions don't look so different. And what is well is if by having this colour, you're saving your brightest whites to the last minute, and when you put them over the top, it's a bit like when we were learning how to paint water sparkles. They look extremely bright because you've got a slightly darker colour around it. So again, with the flat brush, I load up my brush and I put quite chunky blocks of paint on where I kind of want them to be, and then as I want to sort of add sort of finer, less harsh chunks of paint, and I kind of want areas sort of like spray or sort of like where the wave sort of crashes together and you get sort of like little bubbles and spray. I'm just using less paint. So look, if I push down hard, I can create really sharp, chunky blocks of paint. But if I don't dip my brush back in the paint, I can kind of create sort of the illusion of spray, because my paint kind of runs out and I get kind of like a chalky residue. So if I zoom in for you so you can kind of see that. So look, if I get loads of paint, then when I push down, look, I can kind of get it. But if I kind of tap the brush, look, really gently, I can get that kind of spray look. Does that make sense to you all? So it's just knowing how to use your tools. Look, if I just gently tap, and if I don't want it as thick, look, because that's quite thick, it's because I've got lots of paint on it. So look, as the paint runs out of my brush, look, the spray gets thinner and it looks more realistic. So you can always practice on a piece of dark paper. But look, I've got hardly any paint on my brush and I'm just pushing down really gently, and that's creating the illusion of spray. Can you see that? So it's kind of making it look like the wave and all the sort of froth and sea foam. Look, I can even have little bubbles and spray coming off at the top. You can also use a flicking technique, which I'll teach you on another video, to get spray. So we'll do that on another video. But can you see now this kind of area, this bluey white? As I say, acrylics always dry darker and they always absorb the colour. Can you see how it's looking more blue now? So when we were zoomed in, and of course the lighting, it looked more white. But look, now we've zoomed out, it looks like a cool blue. So by adding this colour first, and then when we add the whites over the top, again it just bridges the gap and it kind of links the two sides together. So I'm just putting little droplets down here. I don't want to put too many, I want to keep it nice and dark. Just have some odd ones. You can use just a rough brush and just sort of have hardly any paint on your brush and do the same technique, but I like to do it with a flat brush. And as I say, I have hardly any paint on my brush. I'm just dabbing it against the canvas. And because the canvas is always rough, you know, it's quite texturized, the canvas. Look, just smudging it, you just get these soft areas where it looks like spray and bubbles. And sometimes as well, we're going to do I'm going to do a video later in the week about shallow water and sort of like rocks and things underneath. By having sort of these lighter areas, it kind of looks like sort of bits of the underwater texture sort of shining through, like rocks and things from underneath, where the water sort of glistens and top bit's still transparent. So we're doing all these hidden things, as Bob Ross say, like happy accidents that look kind of cool. Now please dry your painting, because when we go and put the highlights over the top, it's so much easier for the paint not to mix if you dry your painting. So we've got this really nice light colour coming down. We've got this sort of ripples now, and we've got our wave. So now look, if you get just titanium white and a tiny bit of yellow, and you make a sort of buttery yellow, and we add a tiny bit of our phthalo green, we can get a really bright sort of limey turquoise. So lots of white to make it pastel, some cad yellow, and a tiny bit of phthalo green, and you should get this lovely colour. And we're just going to put a tiny bit of literally a dot of light grey in to suck a bit of the vibrancy out, and a tiny bit of purple. And purple will just make it look more earthy and natural. Again, not as cartoony. And what we're going to do, if you imagine the sea foam that's getting bleached by the sun, sometimes it gets like lovely little highlights. And this kind of really pastel lime green is going to sort of insinuate that. So we kind of, again, before we put our brightest whites over the top, we've got some areas of the sea foam in the really bright warm yellow that's getting highlighted because these areas are in the sun. And as we move more to the left, we'll leave plenty more of the blue colder version, and that will look like whites that are in the shade. So all I'm doing, I'm kind of going round areas and just sort of leaving gaps. I'm just putting some highlights over the top. It looks bright now, but it will sink into the dry white and blue, and it'll kind of look more natural. So we're just linking all this area together, making it nice and warm. So let's put some here, so it just looks like it's gleaming. It's the same technique. Look, I've got hardly any paint on my brush. I'm just gently smudging areas so that chalky bits of paint come off, and I can just blend it and spread it really gently. So I'm just getting less and less as I move towards the left hand side. So let's have a little bit on just a hint. Like, so if the light's coming down here, just little areas on the right hand side are just going to be getting a little bit of sunlight. And again, just like everything, I don't want a big jump from one extreme to the other. So by just having a hint of it, even down here, just a hint, makes it look more real. And by going over these areas, this is what I mean about, it looks like kind of shallow water and sort of rocks and stuff underneath that are sort of getting glistened. So let's get some white now. And all I've got is pure titanium white. And all I'm going to start doing now is put the real bright highlights. Now it looks incredibly bright because obviously we're zoomed in under light. But as I say, when we zoom out in a minute, it won't look as bright. And the white, as I've said in many of our tutorials, the white will absorb some of the colour underneath. So sometimes if you want it to look extremely bright, you have to give it a second coat of paint, because the whites will absorb all the colour underneath it. So we're doing the exact same trick as what we just previously did with the lighter blue and the lighter lime green. We're just adding white over the top in areas, and these are all the areas where the sun was absolutely its strongest, and we're sort of bleaching the edge of the wave and sort of creating like a glow, like an outline. So you've learned how to do this on previous videos with things like clouds, where you get like a really lovely glow around the clouds. It's kind of the same with this sharp edge of this wave. And it's also the wash, when you get all the foam and bubbles. So I'm just trying to work out where the light would be kind of hitting. But it's going to be less over here. Still got a little bit, but not as much. And I'm leaving gaps so that cool blue looks like shadows in between. I haven't just done one big blob, so it looks texturized. So look, I want to keep it more blue as I go over there. And then all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to curve it round. Look, I'm just from the top, I'm just kind of dragging the paint so it looks like the wave is crashing down. So what you can do is grab the paint, and pull it. That was my impression. So literally grab the paint, look, and pull. Grab, pull, grab, pull. And try to curve it, and then it looks like it's barreling down. So again, just to add to the realism. So just bringing it down. We kind of did that with the wet sand. Do you remember on the wave painting we did last week? Where we sort of dragged it and it made it look like water reflection on the wet sand. So I've got hardly any paint on my brush with the white, and I'm just dabbing areas. Look, I'm just dabbing it really gently, so hardly any paint's coming off. And all I'm doing, I'm just linking this area so there's not a giant jump from bright super white to light blue. So just take your time, just gently move towards the left and let the paint run out. So that is looking really cool. So now we've zoomed out, look, it is looking really cool. So again, you could finish it here, but we're going to add more detail, and we're going to add some froth and bubbles just to make it look more realistic. So anyone who's done anything about like shallow water, you get lots of things like zigzags and bubbles. So I'm using a thing called a liner brush, which is basically a brush that is really fine. So think of like a fine liner pen or pencil. And the reason it's really fine is because the bristles are really long, and they make kind of like a pinprick. So because they're so, look, if I zoom in, they're really, it's like a really long brush. And again, these are super cheap, but what it does, I'm just using pure titanium white, it makes it so easy to do fine detail because the brush is like having a really sharp long pencil. So all I'm doing is doing little blobs, and I'm just linking areas from the flat water into my wave, and it should look like bubbles and sea foam and froth. And again, it just links one area of the painting to another. So it's just that highlight of detail. So look, just touching it, and because that brush look is so thin, it's just so easy to do little bubbles that aren't really blocky. And look, I could do some zigzags even to create the illusion of froth. Do you remember we did the wave last week? And we kind of, as the water gets more shallow, we put all these bubbles and things where it hit the beach. Well, this is the same sort of practice. You've got like bubbles and foam. And again, when you're zoomed in like this, it looks all a bit weird. But when you stand away from it, just these little dots and little bits of spray and things like that, it just adds to the realism. So when you stand away from it, your painting from the other side of the room will be like, wow, it will look real. So I'm just making the edges look just more frothy with some bubbles. And the great thing about that brush, look, I can do pinprick bubbles. So again, they're really, really cheap, but it's called a liner brush. So I think if you're going to make an investment, try to buy some flat brushes, some big brushes to block in. Look at that. And one of these, a liner brush. So I'm just going to get some blue and white. And where we've done the really sharp highlights on the right hand side, I'm just going to do some same, but so I'm going to do some bubbles, but with the cooler blue tone. So it looks like bubbles and froth, but in the bottom corner. So again, just to link areas together. Now, you will know when your painting is finished. Sometimes you can overwork a painting and keep going and going past when you should stop. Try to, the more experience you get, the more you'll know that is the case to stop. Because sometimes if you keep going, you can spoil it. And the other thing is sometimes take a break. If you're really, really tired and try to force it because you've been focusing for a long time, that can make your work suffer. So always relax, take a break if you get tired, have a coffee. So I think she's pretty much done. So I've stuck her on a nice easel, so she's looking really, really pretty, and I've signed her in the bottom corner. So you've learnt how to paint a wave in acrylics. So we've got the light coming from the right, you've learnt how to do all these ripples, you've learnt how to block it in and blend the colours underneath to create the realism. You've learnt how to create ripples and have the scoops with the flat brush to create realism, and then how to have the sky colour merging. Not to have too much extremes, how to have highlights and shadows that meet in the middle to create the realism, and then lastly how to put the sea foam and the highlights and shadows over the top. So I hope you've really enjoyed this realistic painting of a wave in acrylic paints. I love the teaching, and if you have done, don't forget to tag me at Stewart Paintings with your versions of the tutorials, and I happily share them on my social media. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting, and have a lovely week ahead of you. Well done everyone, take care, bye.